All right, you magnificent bastard, strap in because today we're diving headfirst into some seriously fucked up shit. We're talking about climate change, that apocalyptic train wreck everyone's trying to
Right.
ignore. But here's the kicker. There's this giant stash of cash out there, supposedly to help fix the mess. It's called the Green Climate Fund,
Yep.
or GCF for short. And let me tell you, it's a whole goddamn soap opera of epic proportions.
It is a very complex beast for sure. Lots of moving parts and conflicting interests all over the place.
Complex. It's a goddamn clusterfuck. We're talking billions of dollars. It's supposed to be flowing from the rich assholes who screwed up the planet to the poor saps getting left to drown in rising sea levels. But guess what? Surprise, surprise, it ain't exactly working out that way.
Well, there are definitely challenges, and there's a lot of controversy surrounding the Green Climate Fund, particularly when it comes to the funding and how it's implemented.
Let's cut the crap. The goal was to rake in $100 billion a year by 2020.
Yeah.
$100 billion, like pocket change for these fat cat countries. But did they cough it up? Fuck no. We're sitting on a measly $13.5 billion, which is a pathetic drop in the goddamn bucket compared to what's actually needed.
Yeah, the shortfall in funding is a major concern, and it really reflects this lack of political will among these developed nations. They just don't want to fully commit to climate finance.
Lack of political will. More like a chronic case of a shattery. They're happy to preach about saving the planet, but when it comes to actually putting their money where their mouths are, they suddenly develop amnesia. It's enough to make you want to scream.
Well, the idea behind the GCF is based on this principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. So essentially it acknowledges that, industrialized nations have contributed the most to these historical emissions, and therefore they have a greater obligation to assist these developing countries in mitigating and adapting to climate change.
Okay, so the logic is there. The polluters pay up to clean up their mess. Sounds fair, eh?
Yeah.
But here's where things get really fucking shady. Apparently there's this whole debate about where the money should come from. Some assholes think we should rely heavily on private investors, which, let's be honest, sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, the involvement of the private sector in climate finance is a complex issue. While private investments can bring in much needed capital, there are concerns that they could prioritize profit over the needs of vulnerable communities.
Exactly. Let's not bullshit ourselves.
Yeah.
Corporations aren't exactly known for their altruism. They're going to be sniffing out opportunities to make a buck, not save the goddamn planet. This isn't some feel-good charity project. This is about survival.
Right. There's a need to ensure that private sector involvement in the GCF is aligned with the fund's core mission, which is to support developing nations in their fight against climate change.
Look, I'm not saying private investment has no role to play. But let's not pretend it's the goddamn cavalry riding in to save the day. These countries need to step up and take responsibility. And speaking of responsibility, let's talk about the elephant in the goddamn room. The United States of fucking America.
Yeah, well, the U.S. has historically played a key role in international climate negotiations, but its commitment to the GCF has been pretty inconsistent.
Inconsistent. They promised $3 billion bucks under Obama, then Trump came along and basically said, screw you guys, I'm out. Pulled out of the Paris Agreement, left the GCF hanging. Only a measly billion actually made it out the door. What a bunch of goddamn hypocrites.
Yeah, the U.S. withdrawal from the Paris Agreement and its subsequent reduction in funding for the GCF have undoubtedly had a negative impact on the fund's ability to achieve its objectives.
Impact. It's a goddamn gut punch. It sends a signal to the rest of the world that the U.S. doesn't give a flying fuck about climate change, and it undermines the entire fucking enterprise. And you know what the worst part is? The countries getting screwed over the most are the ones who contributed the least to the problem. It's a goddamn travesty.
Yeah, the inequity of climate change is undeniable. Developing countries are disproportionately affected by its impacts despite having contributed the least to global emissions. The GCF is intended to address this injustice, but it faces significant challenges in doing so effectively.
Okay, so we've established that the GCF is a bureaucratic nightmare plagued by funding shortfalls and political bullshit. But let's dive into the nitty-gritty of how this whole thing is supposed to actually work. I'm talking about the nuts and bolts of getting money from point A, those rich-ass countries, to point B, the projects that are supposed to save our asses.
Well, the GCF operates through what are called thematic funding windows, which channel resources to specific areas of climate action.
Thematic funding windows. Sounds like some bullshit corporate jargon. Break it down for us, Captain Planet. What the fuck does that actually mean?
Basically, these windows are designed to address various aspects of climate change mitigation and adaptation. For example, there's a window for renewable energy projects, one for sustainable forest management, and another for climate resilient infrastructure.
So basically, they've got these little compartments for different types of projects. Renewable energy over here, saving the trees over there, building shit that won't crumble when the floods come over there. Okay, I get it. But how do they decide which projects get the green light? Is it like a beauty pageant for eco-warriors?
The GCF has a rigorous project approval process to ensure that the funds are allocated to initiatives that are well-designed, impactful, and sustainable. They partner with a wide range of organizations, including commercial and development banks, state agencies, and even civil society groups.
Hold on, I've got something here about these projects. It looks like Ghana's got 7 active projects going on while Afghanistan's only got 1. What the hell is up with that? Are they playing favorites?
Well, the distribution of GCF funding varies across countries, and there are several factors that influence this. One is the level of need, as countries that are particularly vulnerable to climate change are often prioritized. Another is the quality of proposals submitted by countries.
So it's not just about who's got the biggest sob story, but also who can put together a decent proposal. Makes sense, I guess. But are they actually making a goddamn difference? Or is this whole thing just a giant circle jerk of bureaucracy and good intentions?
There are numerous examples of GCF-funded projects that are already making a tangible impact. For instance, in Ghana, the GCF has supported a project focused on climate-smart agriculture.
Okay, so they're helping farmers in Ghana deal with the changing climate. That's cool and all, but what about the bigger picture? Are we actually bending the curve on emissions? Are we preventing the goddamn apocalypse?
That's a much larger and more complex question. The GCF is just one piece of the puzzle when it comes to addressing climate change. It's important to have realistic expectations about what it can achieve.
All right, fair enough. But let's not sugarcoat this shit. We're facing a global crisis, and the GCF is supposed to be a major player in the fight. So the question remains, is it actually up to the task?
Well, that's what we're here to explore. The GCF has enormous potential, but it also faces significant challenges.
Challenges? That's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
We've already uncovered a mountain of bullshit. But hold your horses, folks, because we're just getting started. When we come back, we'll be digging deeper into the dark underbelly of the GCF. We'll be exposing the hypocrisy, the greenwashing, and the downright incompetence that's threatening to derail this whole goddamn operation. So grab a drink, take a piss, and get ready for round 2. This shit's about to get real.
One of the biggest headaches with this whole green climate fund thing is making sure the money they're throwing around is actually new and additional.
Pull the fucking phone, new and additional. Sounds like some bureaucratic bullshit to me. What the hell does that even mean?
Basically, it means the cash the GCF gives to these developing countries isn't just recycled development aid. It's supposed to be extra money specifically for climate action on top of what's already being given.
So no sneaky accounting tricks to make it look like they're doing more than they are. But how do you track that shit? Seems like it'd be easy to fudge the numbers.
It's a goddamn nightmare, to be honest. There's no universally agreed upon definition of additionality, which makes it tough to measure and verify.
Sounds like a loophole big enough to drive a fucking Hummer through.
Yeah, there's definitely room for improvement in terms of transparency and accountability when it comes to tracking the newness and additionality of GCF funds.
Okay, let's say we've got this new money coming in, and it's all legit. How the hell do we measure the results? Like, how do we know if these projects are actually making a difference, especially when it comes to adaptation?
That's another clusterfuck entirely. Measuring adaptation efforts is inherently complex. Unlike mitigation, where you can quantify emissions reductions, adaptation is about building resilience, which is hard to put a number on.
So we're talking about things like helping farmers deal with droughts or building early warning systems for floods. Shit, that's hard to measure.
Exactly. It's about reducing vulnerability and enhancing adaptive capacity. There's no single metric that can capture the effectiveness of these efforts.
Sounds like a pain in the ass for anyone trying to evaluate the GCF's impact.
It definitely presents some methodological challenges. Traditional monitoring and evaluation frameworks often fall short when it comes to assessing adaptation.
So it's not just about how much money is being spent, but how it's being used and what kind of outcomes it's producing. And when it comes to adaptation, that's a whole other can of worms.
Precisely. The GCF needs to find better ways to measure and demonstrate its impact on adaptation. Otherwise, it risks being perceived as ineffective despite its potential.
All right, we've talked about the challenges of funding, the complexities of measuring adaptation, and the whole fossil fuel controversy. What else is there to consider?
Well, there's the whole issue of governance.
Governance. You mean like who's calling the shots at the GCF? Who's the puppet master pulling the strings?
The GCF is governed by a board of 24 members, representing both developed and developing countries. The board sets the strategic direction of the fund, approves projects, and oversees operations.
Sounds like a lot of power in the hands of a few. Any concerns about transparency and accountability? Because when you're dealing with this kind of money, shit can get shady real quick.
There have been criticisms about the transparency of the GCF's decision-making processes. Some groups have argued that board meetings should be more open to public scrutiny, and that there needs to be greater accountability for how decisions are made.
So basically more sunlight on the GCF's inner workings to make sure they're not screwing us over.
Yeah, transparency and accountability are essential for building trust and ensuring the GCF operates fairly and equitably.
Right, because secrecy breeds corruption, especially when you're talking about billions of dollars.
Exactly. That's why civil society organizations and other stakeholders are pushing for greater transparency and participation in the GCF's governance.
Okay, so we've got governance issues, transparency concerns, funding shortfalls, measurement headaches. Is this thing even remotely functional?
It's facing its share of challenges, that's for sure. But it's also important to remember that the GCF is operating in a rapidly changing global landscape.
You mean like the whole climate crisis is getting worse and we're running out of time to fix it?
That and the geopolitical context is shifting. With rising nationalism, economic uncertainties, and a growing distrust of multilateral institutions, all of this creates a challenging environment for the GCF to operate effectively.
So the GCF is trying to put out a fire while standing in the middle of a goddamn hurricane.
It's a daunting task, no doubt. The GCF needs to be agile and adaptable to respond to these evolving challenges and remain relevant in the years to come.
Sounds like they need a serious upgrade if they want to be a real player in this fight.
I agree. There's a lot of work to be done to address these challenges and realize the full potential of the Green Climate Fund.
All right, let's recap for a second. We've got this giant climate fund that's supposed to be the world's savior, but it's struggling to get the cash it needs. It's got transparency issues out the ass, and it can't even figure out how to measure half of what it's doing.
Yeah.
Plus, the plan is burning up faster than a meth head's credit card.
It's a complex and multifaceted issue with no easy solutions.
No shit, Sherlock. But we got to do something right. We can't just sit here and watch the world burn. So what the fuck is the plan? What needs to happen to make the GCF actually work?
Well, first off, those rich bastards need to stop jerking us around and actually pony up the cash they promised. Remember that $100 billion a year goal? They're acting like it's a goddamn suggestion, not a commitment.
Yeah, it's like they think climate change is just going to magically disappear if they ignore it long enough. Fucking delusional.
There needs to be serious political will to mobilize the necessary resources. And it can't just be about throwing money at the problem. It needs to be predictable, accessible, and aligned with the needs of developing countries.
So no more empty promises or bureaucratic bullshit, just cold, hard cash delivered straight to the people who need it most.
Exactly. And the GCF itself needs to get its shit together and become more efficient and transparent. Streamline that goddamn project approval process, make the decision-making more open, and hold those motherfuckers accountable for their actions.
Yeah, let's cut the crap and get down to business. No more hiding behind closed doors and making backroom deals.
We also need to find better ways to measure the impact of adaptation efforts. Develop new metrics, new frameworks that can actually capture the complexities of building resilience.
Because if we can't show that this shit is actually working, then the whole GCF just looks like a giant waste of money. And right now, it's not exactly inspiring confidence.
And let's not forget about the elephant in the room, fossil fuels. The GCF needs to take a hard stance and stop funding those planet-killing projects.
No more loopholes, no more special circumstances. Just say, fuck no to fossil fuels. It's not rocket science.
It's about aligning the GCS investments with the goals of the Paris Agreement and making sure the funds are used to support a just transition to a low-carbon future.
Look, I'm not some tree-hugging hippie, but even I can see that we're on a one-way trip to a climate apocalypse if we don't get our shit together. And the GCF, with all its flaws and fuck-ups, is supposed to be one of our best shots at avoiding that fate.
The GCF has the potential to be a powerful tool, but it needs to evolve and adapt to meet the challenges ahead. It needs to be bolder, more transparent, and more accountable to the people it's supposed to be serving.
So what you're saying is there's still hope, that this whole Green Climate Fund thing isn't a complete and utter failure.
There's always hope, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of pressure from us, the people, to make sure those in power actually do their goddamn jobs.
All right, you heard it here first, folks. The Green Climate Fund, a glimmer of hope in a world that's quickly going to shit. But it's up to us to hold those bastards accountable and demand real action. Because if this thing fails, we're all fucked.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fucked up world of climate finance. And remember, stay angry, stay loud, and don't let those bastards grind you down